Peace to the world!
We have the cat. Everyone's very concerned about the cat. We have a cat. The white cat. Sue. He's right there. Suki Sue. Kitty, 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 kitty. It's very sad, but Ralph pees in the house. The new owners of the house loved Ralph, and so they gave him a forever home. And so he's in his barn.
Just sad, but they send us updates and lots of pictures from the new house, and so that makes me feel better. And the people that bought our house are, I don't know, I love them because they're just
making pumpkin pies with the pumpkins.
Oh my gosh.
Harvesting our garden.
They sent us pictures of the pumpkins that we planted, and they're like massive, and there's so many of them, just like last year's. All sorts of colorful corn that you had planted, and
the Indian
eggplant.
corn. Are we allowed to call it Indian corn?
Native American corn? I don't know. Is it still Indian corn? I don't know. And now we have soup and Argus and chickens. I feel a lot of people have asked about the chickens as well.
The chickens went to live with my mom.
Because she has
Chickens.
big old flock of chickens.
This conversation, I feel like, is one that we've had randomly that pops up when we're living life. I feel like it's something that is a regular occurrence in my life anyways, when I'm doing some random activity. Yesterday it was gardening. I woke up in the morning, had coffee, went outside, digging holes, planting succulents, doing all this stuff, and I just kept having these waves of events that would come to mind, seemingly sparked by nothing. I almost wanted to dig a hole to bury myself, because that's like the feeling I felt was like, ugh! Nobody even in my life right now even knows that that ever happened, but I feel just such cringe-worthy shame over it. I'm hyper aware of those type of events that have happened in my life, and I always remind myself that everybody does stupid things. Always try to be, better and try not to make the same mistake, but also that most people, probably the people that are involved in whatever embarrassing, like shameful event or thing that happened to me or that I did, probably doesn't even remember it. Like if you think of other people in your life, I mean, just randomly picking somebody, but even somebody as close as your sister to you, you can't think of things that she's done that's been cringeworthy, embarrassing.
Well, but sometimes you think about those, but you don't know, you're not in their head, so you think about, you don't know what's cringeworthy to them. So, but the thing, like, you might remember something that they've done, but you just assume that's like part of who they are or something. But I feel like that's what makes it feel extra cringy to me, because sometimes I'll say or do something and like I know I feel that way about it, but they don't know that you feel that way about it. So then you're like, does that then get like branded, or not branded, but does that get like assumed to be part of my personality or who I am?
But I don't think that it is. Oh, you mean?
We're talking in such circles because it's a complex situation. Or,
it is, and the thing is,
topic.
And when I came home from the gym this morning, and you mentioned Brene Brown, she'll get me going on a whole different direction because she really provokes thought. But I think that there is, what you were saying, what did you say? There's a difference between the shame and the guilt. But then I asked, like, where's embarrassment? Like, where, you know what I mean? Because to me, those are all things that are very similar.
Yeah,
I feel like
totally.
But the guilt thing is where like, I really dip out on the guilt part, but I recognize that they kind of seem similar, but the guilt part, there are things that I feel guilty about, but there's things that like grieving, I feel shame for grieving, which is weird, right? My cousin Ruben, who died when I was 10, 12, well, I don't even know how, but I remember that time in my life, and I remember being upset when my grandparents and the school principal and the school board came to my school at the time to plant the tree in memory of him, and they pulled me out of class. I had no idea what was happening, but it pulled me out of class, and the next thing I know, like I'm standing, there's a hole in the ground, there's a tree, my grandparents are there, and I'm like, why are my grandparents here? And nobody told me what was happening. I just figured it out. The not knowing of what was happening and like feeling this grief at the time, I feel shameful for grieving and crying. And I remember my grandma Hamilton hugging me as this was going on. Is that any reason to feel?
No, that's interesting.
But maybe that's more embarrassment than shame. But I definitely feel something that I shouldn't feel because of that event. I was a kid,
Right.
one. But even as an adult, to grieve is not a bad thing.
No, of course
it's
not.
love. It's.
Of course.
I'll be right back.
Okay. I gotta go see what he's up to. Whoa, 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 whoa! What are you doing over here?
Planting my tree.
Why are you planting a tree right now?
Because for our sponsor, Established Titles.
No.
We gotta plant a tree.
No, you knucklehead. You don't plant a tree. Established Titles plants the tree. Listen, that is one of the coolest things about this company and this whole concept is that you can become a lord or lady and become a landowner in Scotland and at the same time support preserving the natural woodlands of Scotland and world reforestation.
I love reforestation.
So Established Titles is this great concept where you can go online, you can buy a plot of land on a private estate in Edelston, Scotland. You can buy anywhere from just 1 square foot up to 10 square feet. And it becomes really official because you get this certificate here. We bought ours as a gift for my grandmother. So she is now Lady Patricia Dallas. And you can go on there and you can find exactly where your plot of land is. You can even make your name a lord or lady on plane tickets, credit cards, dating apps. If you're trying to impress, you know, somebody who's making the swipe, you can drop that little lord or lady title in there. It's a project that's based on the old Scottish tradition that if you own a piece of land, you are referred to as a laird or a lord or a lady.
And with every order, Established Titles plants a tree. They work with global charities, One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future, to support global reforestation efforts.
This makes a great gift, especially with the holidays coming up, or if you find yourself in a pinch, it's even an even better last minute gift because it happens quickly. What a fun, great way to celebrate somebody by making them a lord or a lady. And here's what's even cooler. The first 200 people to use our link to go buy a piece of land will get a plot within walking distance from our plot. We get to end up building our own little Matt and Blue kingdom.
We'll be neighbors.
We'll be neighbors.
Established Titles is running a Black Friday special, so if you use our code Matt and Blue, you get an additional 10% off.
Yep, so go to establishedtitles.com/mattandblue. You get your 10% off and make us neighbors.
But be warned, because Matt's a very loud neighbor.
I should clarify when you bring up Brene Brown, is like when she was talking about the difference between guilt or shame. You know, she said guilt is like maybe when you say something and you cringe at something you said, but then you feel guilty about the way it made somebody else feel. Or if you do something, so guilt is a result of a behavior. Whereas they're saying, I feel bad because of this, whereas shame is, I am bad. So you feel shame is like, I'm not good enough, or I'm a bad person because of this, or... and then I get where when you say embarrassment, I feel like I understand that that's another color that sort of lives in that same world as these other two feelings or emotions. But yeah, that's just interesting. Like, where is the line between? Like, you felt you identify it then, or is like you're still like trying to figure out, is it embarrassment or was it
I feel like
or...
I feel like it's a I mean, at this point, listen, it was so long ago, but I feel like the fact that still comes up randomly when I'm digging a hole in the garden, I feel like that's gotta mean there's some kind of underlying, like maybe it's grief, or maybe what is the word that I've carried with me all these years, and it's got to be impacting other parts of my life that I'm not aware of. But that feeling that I've always associated with shame, or embarrassment, sometimes it's crippled.
There's such a stigma around men being vulnerable, or men showing weakness, or crying in public. And I think that even whether or not maybe you were surrounded by that by your family or your parents, there still is a sort of social stigma that is around men showing weakness. So I feel like that's probably pretty
like it was
common.
present at the time, even though I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. That like you're a boy crying at school.
I mean, there was, I mean, I think there were things in my life at that time too, where I had 4 sisters and I'd play with Barbies, and I remember getting laughed at, and just like the whole, like, you can't do that because you're a boy, this is how it's supposed to be. I don't think it was necessarily like men don't show grief because you have a penis, and if you had a vagina, then you could feel this, but you're not allowed. I don't remember that necessarily, but I feel like that mentality was very much alive in the 80s.
That's what I mean. Yeah. I mean, there's even things that I remember, like as a kid, I dressed in certain ways that I would get made fun of a lot.
You know, turtleneck in the summertime?
Well, turtlenecks in the summer, or I would like puffy paint t-shirts. I remember one time I puffy painted a t-shirt for Valentine's Day and it had hearts on it and it said Happy Valentine's Day. And I remember kids making fun of me because it was like pink and red hearts and like whatever. And I felt very ashamed in that moment, but I was also at that time very stubborn, almost in the way that our son is with stuff that I didn't care. I mean, I cared, obviously I cared, but I wasn't gonna let that stop me from wearing something I want.
Do you think our son is gonna feel the same way because his favorite color is pink?
Well, it's pink.
He wears pink things and wears hair clips.
Sometimes, like when his hair was, now he's got a cut, but he had long hair and his bangs were always in his face, so he would wear his sister's clips in his hair to keep his hair out of his face, but he didn't care and he wouldn't talk. I mean, I don't know.
We would give him that talk though, like you had to be prepared for this, but as long as you inside don't care, then you have to live your truth. I feel like hopefully with that kind of support, he doesn't feel that way.
I don't know, maybe, yeah. But we also, I mean, it also is, you know, what was that, was the 80s? We're talking about 40 years later.
Watch it.
35. Honestly, I think back to a lot of these things, and I think about the difference between guilt and shame, and there's a lot of things that I feel guilty for, and I don't know if I remember if I've shared the story on here, but you know, there was one time I worked at Macy's and I was ringing somebody up, and I couldn't get something to work on a cash register. I couldn't figure out change. I think maybe it was. I was giving her back change, and I was just like having a hard time doing it. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm just retarded. I can't do this right now." And she said, "No, you're not." And I looked up at her, and she was some sort of like handicap or disability. And she looked at me and she said, "You would never, don't say that. You would never want to be." And I just wanted to die. And I think that was the last time I ever used that word. Is that shame or is that guilt? Because I felt guilty about it.
It should be embarrassment. It should be shame.
And it was all those things.
Guilt, all those things.
It was all those things. And I remember, and it is one of the things that haunts me to this day. Or, I mean, there's other things that I did in high school. I mean, obviously a lot in high school because I said and did so many stupid things in high school that I'm so embarrassed and so like make me cringe to this day.
Oh, why do you think you remember them though? That's the thing that I can't. Well, why do they just?
Well, because there's even things that I say like even recently, and especially coming out of the pandemic and coming out of 2 years of just not being that social or being around people, and I feel like my people skills have suffered because of it. You know, for 2 years, it was almost over. It was like all of the, like save maybe a few Zoom calls or like things, but like on a daily basis, you were the only person I was engaging with, and our son at the time. I feel like coming back into the real world, there's things that I've said or done where I've just been like, and immediately, right after I say it, I feel like, oh, I can't believe I just said that. Or I might like just think back on it a day or two later and be like, ugh, why did I handle that situation that way? And I think a lot of it was just like trying to find our way back into it. But I felt
since the pandemic?
Yeah, like even there were a couple of things that even I said when we were in Italy, like, you know, we were around 23 people, and there were just a couple things that were like little, and I said that I don't even know if the person that I said that to would even remember, or even maybe didn't even think twice about it, but I still cringe and I still feel terrible about it. The point that I'm trying to make here is we do carry these things with us. And I think it is, to err is human, and we will continue to fail and say things and do things that make us feel ashamed or embarrassed or guilty. But that is part of being human, and it's about taking it, it's about it's sticking with you so that you can learn from that and that you can make the change. And that's what makes you a better person, is saying, okay, I did that, I don't want to do that ever again, or I don't want to make somebody feel that way ever again.
Fair enough.
And in the end, but we are all on our own journey to be or like evolve into who we will become. And all of these little missteps or all these little things are just, they're about you, and they're just about your learning experience and your journey. So it's what you do with it. And that's why, like, sometimes, like, somebody might say something, or I don't know, I hear stories about I met this celebrity and they were rude, or I've worked with that person, even out not in the industry, but just like through friends, I know that person and they said something really mean to me, and you're like, but we all have done it, and I feel like we all said these things, and so we have to be a little like have. I mean, if somebody's continuously doing it, there's one thing if it's like becomes a pattern or becomes a behavior or something that's happened consistently. But if somebody says or does something and they're able to like, there has to be some sort of.
I think it's okay to make a mistake, and I think it's okay to put your foot in your mouth, and I even think it's okay to like rough somebody up and bust somebody's balls and like give them a hard time. And I can't imagine you doing something so terrible since the pandemic. I don't think you should be holding on to.
It sounds so terrible.
You're a pretty good person.
My point is just that it's about our journey. Like it's about your journey, and it's what you do with it. And then I think about shame and what Brene Brown said, that it's not feeling good enough. And I think about those times in my life. And a lot of those are like public speaking. I have a really hard time with it. And right before I go to, like, if I have to give a speech or to speak in front of a large group of people, I start having all those feelings of shit, of like, I'm not good enough, I'm gonna say something embarrassing, I'm not smart enough to motivate people or say something inspirational. And like those are, I feel like, a lot of the times when I feel like the most amount of like shame, or the feel of like I'm not good enough.
I feel like everyone's got to feel some level of what we're talking about. I think that if you are so unaware that you can't, have that humility to look back and be like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? And like, you really should every once in a while. I feel like it's kind of like a check, right? Like you check yourself. Yeah. It's learning what, from the past. You don't want to make somebody feel that way again. You don't want to make yourself feel that way again. You don't want to put that energy out to the universe, whatever it is. Learning from the past so you don't repeat it again.
That's what I think it's a necessity.
How many people feel that?
I think everybody does. I think if you don't, you're a sociopath. And there's I think by definition, so I think everybody has some element of shame.
That was our talk today. I feel good, but now once we put this on YouTube, are we gonna feel an element of shame from sharing all of this?
Quite possibly. I'm gonna feel shame that I can't believe that this exists on the internet, and that thousands and thousands of people have watched me ramble and say things that are just foolish.
Yeah. So at least throw us a bone and like the video or do something. Did this help you? Let us know in the comments below.
What are your thoughts on shame? How do you feel about your shame? How do you deal with your shame?
Shame. That's me in the garden. All the trees are just shame. Dig your hole. Shame. Bury yourself. Shame. We want you to be in on the know, and go to our website 25north.com, because candles are restocked.
Yes.
More stuff coming out. So
yes.
25north.com. Woo. Peace out.
Bye. Bye.